Most empires expanded slowly. The Mongol Empire didn't expand, it detonated. In less than a century, a group of nomadic horsemen from the Asian steppe created the largest continuous empire in human history, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. They didn't do it with numbers. They didn't do it with technology. They did it with speed, fear, and a system so ruthless it shattered entire civilizations before they could react. This story doesn't begin with an empire. It begins with hunger. The man history would call Genghis Khan was born Temujin, poor, abandoned, and surrounded by enemies. His father was poisoned by a rival tribe. His family was cast out and left to starve. Temujin grew up hunted, betrayed, and eventually captured. At one point, he was enslaved with a wooden collar around his neck. A public humiliation meant to break him. It didn't. What it created was a leader who believed one thing above all else. Loyalty was everything. When Temujin escaped and began uniting the Mongol tribes, he broke every rule of the steppe. He didn't reward noble blood. He didn't care about lineage. He promoted warriors based on merit alone. If you fought well, you rose. If you betrayed him, you died. This created an army unlike anything the world had ever seen. Every Mongol warrior was raised on horseback. They could ride for days without stopping. They carried multiple horses, switching mounts to stay fresh while enemies collapsed from exhaustion. They lived off dried meat, fermented milk, and blood taken from their own horses in emergencies. No supply wagons, no slow-moving baggage trains. A Mongol army could travel 3 times faster than any enemy force, and attack from directions considered impossible. But speed wasn't their most terrifying weapon. Fear was. The Mongols practiced psychological warfare on an industrial scale. If a city surrendered immediately, its people were spared. Taxes were taken, life continued. If a city resisted, the punishment was absolute. The population was massacred, the city burned. Survivors were deliberately released to spread the story. The message was simple and effective. Resistance equals extinction. Many cities surrendered without a single arrow being fired. Those who didn't became examples. The Mongols perfected deception. They staged fake retreats, drawing enemy armies into open terrain before surrounding them from all sides. Signals were passed by flags, horns, and messengers, allowing coordination across vast distances. And when they encountered something they didn't have, siege weapons, engineers, doctors, they didn't destroy it. They absorbed it. Chinese engineers built siege engines. Persian administrators ran conquered cities. Arab scholars were forced to work for the empire. The Mongol war machine learned faster than any civilization before it. By the time the world realized what was happening, it was already too late. The Mongols were no longer raiders. They were no longer tribes. They were an empire in motion, and under Genghis Khan's command, they began pushing west, toward wealthy cities, ancient kingdoms, and empires that believed distance and walls would protect them. They were wrong. By the time the Mongols reached the heart of Central Asia, the world was already beginning to fracture under the pressure of their advance, even though many rulers still believed their cities, wealth, and distance would protect them from what was happening on the steppe. Standing in the Mongols' path was the Khwarezmian Empire, one of the richest and most powerful states of its time, filled with vast cities, thriving trade routes, and a ruler who believed no nomadic army could threaten him. That illusion ended the moment Mongol envoys were arrested, humiliated, and executed. In Mongol culture, envoys were sacred, and killing them was not treated as an insult or a provocation, but as an irreversible decision that guaranteed absolute retaliation. When Genghis Khan received the news, he did not rage, negotiate, or hesitate. Instead, he began planning one of the most devastating campaigns the world had ever witnessed. The Mongol armies did not march as a single force. They separated into multiple columns, crossing deserts, rivers, and mountain ranges that defenders believed were impossible for large armies to traverse. Cities were struck from unexpected directions, often before warnings could be sent or defenses prepared, creating panic that spread faster than any messenger. Bukhara fell after its defenses collapsed from within. Samarkand followed soon after, overwhelmed by coordinated assaults and internal betrayal. At cities like Merv and Nishapur, destruction reached such an extreme level that entire populations were killed or displaced, irrigation systems were destroyed, and the land itself was deliberately ruined to ensure resistance would never rise again. This violence was not uncontrolled chaos, it was calculated. The Mongols wanted their reputation to travel ahead of them, so survivors were intentionally released, carrying stories of slaughter to the next cities in line. In many cases, the fear alone was enough to force surrender without a fight. Yet even in destruction, the Mongols were selective. Engineers, scholars, doctors, and administrators were spared and absorbed into the empire. Knowledge was treated as loot just as valuable as gold, and every conquest made the Mongol war machine more advanced and more dangerous. When Genghis Khan died, the empire did not collapse under its own weight. It expanded. Under his successor, Ögedei Khan, Mongol forces surged into Eastern Europe, crushing armies in Russia, Poland, and Hungary with tactics that European commanders had never faced. Heavy cavalry charges failed against speed, encirclement, and relentless missile fire, leaving entire knightly armies destroyed in open fields. Europe panicked. Church bells rang continuously, chroniclers wrote of demons from the east, and many believed the Mongols were a divine punishment sent to end the world. Cities prepared for sieges that never came, expecting annihilation at any moment. Europe survived not through strength, but through timing. When Ögedei Khan died in 1241, Mongol law demanded that leaders return east to elect a new great Khan, halting the invasion almost overnight. The Mongols were not defeated, they simply turned back. Over time, the empire fractured into powerful khanates. In the west, the Golden Horde ruled over Russia for generations, while other Mongol states controlled Persia and China, dominating the most important trade routes in the world. For a brief period, the Mongols created an era of relative stability known as the Pax Mongolica, where merchants could travel thousands of kilometers under imperial protection, allowing goods, technology, and ideas to move across continents faster than ever before. Even travelers like Marco Polo crossed Eurasia under Mongol rule, but unity did not last. Succession wars weakened the empire from within. Rival khanates fought each other, and the vast trade networks that connected the world also carried disease, including the Black Death, which killed millions across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. By the late 1300s, the Mongol Empire had fragmented completely, not through a single dramatic collapse, but through slow decay, internal conflict, and loss of control. Yet its impact never faded. The Mongols reshaped borders, accelerated global trade, spread technology and disease, and permanently altered how civilizations interacted with one another. They ruled through fear, but they also connected the world in ways that could never be undone. The Mongol Empire was not just the largest empire in history, it was the most disruptive force humanity had ever unleashed.